You are one of those guys dominating social media.
I started playing with fingers simply because I didn't know that you should use a pick for electric guitar.
We know the guitar player. How did you get to the point you're at today?
I think I immediately realized that
Matteo Mancuso is a guitarist like no other. Known for his mind-blowing technique, his pushing the limits of what is possible to do with a guitar.
I was really into AC/DC. We all learned that Starway to Heaven solo, we all learned like... But then my father said, we need to go back in time and listen to the players that came before, so you have a clearer idea of how guitar developed.
Before, when I was young, playing with your fingers, it was uncool. Now, if you see on TikTok and Instagram, people want to play like Matteo Mancuso. If there's young people out there, or old people out there, who want to learn how to play like you, how do one start?
Well, first of all, I always talk about...
Buonasera, Matteo.
Buonasera, grazie.
I did my best there, but I don't think
it was a good pronunciation, actually.
Impress anyone.
Yeah.
It was okay. It was. I guess it was a bit over the top. It was like how I'm Norwegian, and it's like how if you're talking silly Italian in Norway, that's like buonasera. It's like very like that. That's our idea of Italians, and it's Matteo. Great to finally connect. I've heard like you are, and you have been sort of an enigma, a legend of sorts on the internet for people like me who are like interested in guitar and guitar players. And I have this, I don't know what you can call it. It's a kind of probably a sickness of sorts that I love, like watching these guitarists on Instagram, TikTok and stuff, people doing stuff that I am not able, unfortunately, to do myself. And you are one of those guys who are like dominating social media. So it's an honor to finally connect. And I think a lot of people know about you, especially people who are interested in guitar. But I feel like maybe we can start by getting to know you a bit better. Like like we know the guitar player Matteo Mancuso, but who are you, and how did you get to the point you're at today? And so I want to go back, and I guess my first question is, what's your first memory of music?
Well, to be honest, I don't really remember the first one. But I remember that I was surrounded by music. There was always music at home. And I consider myself really lucky because of that. I came from a very musical family. My father plays guitar, and my mother likes to sing in the shower. She's a teacher in middle school, but she loves music as well. I have one older brother and one older sister, and they both play guitar. My brother is more in the classical world. He plays classical guitar. My sister writes a lot of songs. She writes like 40 songs a month. It's like incredible. But
pop songs? Is he into pop?
He's more into the pop stuff. But she listens to a lot of different music, and she knows a lot of chords as well with the guitar. She likes to like comp herself and sing. So I always grew up with the mindset that, and when I was a little kid, I thought that every family was like that in a way, like everyone was interested in music. And then I remembered when I was in middle school, everyone was interested in football. And I didn't even know what Juventus was or what AC Milan was. I have this remembering when I was 11. And I just thought that music was a regular thing for families in a way. But then I slowly discovered that that wasn't the case at all. A lot of people...
No, most Italians only care about football.
Most of the time. So I thought of myself, I'm really lucky because my family is so interested in music that I was able to listen to a lot of different things from the start. And I think that was a big advantage compared to maybe other people that got interested in music maybe later on. But having a musical family, and especially having a father that is also an incredible musician, an incredible guitar player as well, it was for sure incredibly useful. And my father, I always say that my father is still one of the best guitar players I know. And it's really something, and it surprises me sometimes. Like, he plays licks that I never heard before, and I know him from the day I was born, you know. So he's an amazing player.
What style is he into?
Well, he can play everything. He can play everything, from rock to jazz.
Yeah.
He can play Jimi Hendrix tunes, and the next day he plays giant steps at 300 BPM. You know, can play over the changes. He started more as a studio musician, so he's very well rounded in a lot of styles. Then he became also a producer. Especially in the 80s and 90s, he worked with a lot of Italian artists. And but when I was born, I was born in 1996. I'm 28 now. And of course, when I was born and more in the 2000s, he was more at home to stay with his sons, you know. So he didn't really travel so much like the early days, of course. Because, of course, if you are a musician, you travel a lot. But if you have a family at home, it's a little bit harder to do that.
But the time he spent with his kids kind of paid off, though. it's like you're kind of a living proof that, time well spent.
Yeah, I think
in a way.
we did have a lot of fun together. I always liked to play with him. And I think he's also a good teacher.
When did
I started playing when I was 10 years old. And...
Okay, that's kind of late, though.
Yeah.
Like I in my head, I had this idea that you started when you were 2.
No, not really.
Baby guitar.
I wasn't really interested from the start. I was more like I wanted to do a lot of different things, and I really like to do sports. Back when I was a little kid, I was playing a lot of football in the street, or maybe playing with my friends and running a lot. Really running a lot. At least that's what my parents told me, because I don't really remember exactly. I have a really bad memory. Yeah. But then I began to be interested in guitar when I was 10 or 11 years old. And I started to study in a more deep way when I was around 15 or 16 years old.
But what made you, like, what changed? Do you remember that? What made you think that this thing maybe this is my calling?
I think I immediately realized that this thing, let's say, was attracting me in a way, and I realized that some things were easy for me, and from other people they weren't that easy. So I realized, okay, I have a predisposition for this instrument, but in order to utilize, let's say, at the max of my abilities, the talent I have, you need to study a lot. And I realized that thanks to internet and seeing a lot of guitar players on YouTube, see a lot of master players on the internet, and back then I was comparing myself with my other friends, and and that was a little bit easier for me because there were some of my friends that started guitar with me, and I realized, okay, what I can do, maybe I learned something in 2 hours and they were learning in 1 week, you know? So I realized immediately, okay, there's something that feels easy for me. But then when I did go to internet, I realized, okay, I'm not the only one that can do some things with the guitar, you know. So I started to study more and more when I realized how many incredible guitar players there are in the world. Let's say.
This is super fascinating to me because I'm a bit older than you, but not that much older, a couple of years older than you, but we didn't have the internet. So when I started to play guitar, that was something, and I didn't have the father or mother for that sake that could teach me. So I remember that I had to we bought these books, like it was like Beatles tunes and stuff. And on the top of the sheet, you had these like kind of like boxes where you can see how to kind of
how to play,
you have to press
the
these places, exactly, in order to get the chord. And that was my beginning. And I still to this day I'm like fretting completely wrong, probably because nobody told me use the index finger there and this is how you do it. But and then I another life-changing moment for me was when I was able to borrow a DVD from a friend who had been able to like get a DVD from the best Norwegian guitar player. And then, of course, later YouTube came, and today, like it's everywhere. It's so prevalent. It's so, in quotation mark, it's so easy to get okay at guitar. At least get all the knowledge in the world. We have like the Library of Alexandria of guitar at our hands, in our pocket. So, but of course, it's the difficult part is to have the talent and to do the work still. But it seems to me that from what you said there, that you might be like the first, maybe the very first generation or very first like year of people who kind of had YouTube. Did you feel like you had YouTube immediately, or was that when
what
you were
I remember,
older?
I felt like it was always there. I remember a time when, of course, the phone was not so prevalent. So I remember the period before the smartphones, let's say. But YouTube was already there. Like the internet thing was, of course, already there. And when I was 10, it was, I think, 2005. Yeah. I think YouTube was created in 2007. But yeah, so like from what I remember, I always had YouTube available. Like I remember that I was slowing down Eruption from Van Halen, for example, on YouTube. And I learned that from YouTube.
Exactly. And you had the function.
You have the function that you can slow down the videos. And I learned that the Eruption solo thanks to that slow down element. So it is for sure easier to get good at guitar right now.
Yeah, exactly. On the flip side, though, as you said, so there are two effects here. You have the one is like it's much easier to get good because, or theoretically much easier to get good because you have access to all the information. But on the flip side, as you said, that when I was young, I can only compare myself to the people who live in the same small like village in Norway that I grew up in, right? And I was the best. I fucking dominated my age group. But the problem is that age group probably sucked. So who cares? But I didn't have Instagram or TikTok or YouTube to kind of ruin my self-esteem. So I honestly believe that I was the fucking shits. But of course, then at some point you get out there and you move to a bigger city and you understand that you're nothing. But what you explained there is that you had like you thought you were I'm the shit. Like look at me. And then you go to YouTube and you're like just like,
well, that was the same thing for me back when I started. Of course, I was always seeing my father as the arriving point, let's say, because he was, of course, the first professional player I ever seen from the start, So I already knew, okay, this is a professional player, and there's difference between an amateur and that guy,
game.
But I was comparing myself, of course, with people of my age, and I realized, okay, I can do this, and I only studied it for this day, and why all the other my friends cannot do that like me. So that's why I immediately realized that. But I realized that this can be a work later on, because back when I started, it was more like my favorite hobby, let's say. Then when I was about 15 or 16, I realized, okay, this can be a job. But in order to transform it into a job and not just your favorite hobby, you need to study a lot more than you are used to. And that's when my mind switched a little bit. I started to study more classical guitar because I wasn't really a good student of classical guitar. I never was, actually, but I started to study a little bit more when I was about 16 years old. And that was for sure incredibly useful for my development as a player. And then, of course, I always try to to play with other musicians, not just other guitar players, but musicians in general. And one thing that stuck with me, and I don't really remember where I heard it the first time, but it's a phrase that I really like to repeat over and over in my head, that the best way to improve is to play with musicians better than you. And if you are the worst musician in the room, that means that you are in the right room. So always try to play with people better than you, not just guitar players, of course, trying to find a drummer, a good bass player, a good piano player that you can play with. And that will be so, there will be so much things to borrow in order to grow when you play with other people, because music is just a language. The best way to learn a language is actually to speak it with native people. You know, if you want to learn Spanish, the best way to learn Spanish in a fast way is go to Spain, in Madrid, and talk with people. Yeah. And that's the same thing with music.
100%. Yeah, because this goes for everything. What you just said goes for everything. No matter what you want to get good at. Like, and I completely agree, and I always strive to be the worst guy in the room, in a sense, because that means that you are growing, and you have to kind of up your game all the time.
Of course,
to earn the guys' respect. But on the way here, or when did, because like the elephant in the room, everybody who's listening to this know that you are world famous for your unique technique, fingerstyle picking instead of using a pick. When did, and to me it looks a lot like classical guitar, or at least what I believe, how I believe classical guitarists play. How did that technique? What happened there? Because you have innovated guitar.
Thank you.
You have reinvented guitar playing. Yeah, but you have, and that is why I find it very fascinating to talk to you. And how did that come about?
To be honest, I started playing with fingers simply because I didn't know that you should use a pick for electric guitar. And that was kind of strange because I always saw my father playing classical guitar at home. So I just thought that every guitar was meant to be played like that. I always saw him playing with fingers. So I just thought, okay, if you pick up a Strat, then you play with fingers, because why not? And then then I discovered that most of the people use a pick for electric, and they use fingers for classical. But back when I started, and I'm talking about when I was 10 years old, and they were like the first months of picking up the guitar and practicing. And then maybe because I saw an Angus Young video, I remember that was really into AC/DC at that time. And I was, and I started seeing a video of Angus Young playing with a pick. So I thought, okay, that's why he has that kind of sound. Because the first thing I noticed about fingers is that the sound was way darker than what I was hearing on the records. So the
attack, of course, is
so that's why I started to develop nails. So here I have, they're not really long actually, and here I have it. Yeah. And in order to achieve that kind of attack, I started to grow nails, and that's what classical players are doing, of course, in order to achieve let's say, a snappier attack, an attack that's similar to the pick attack. Because if you only have the flash available, the sound will be too muddy and dark. So that's the first thing.
But how do you play? Like, but if you do it now,
I can do it now if you want.
Bring the guitar.
The first technique
you don't have a super.
I grew up to was this kind of bass technique. So. And this is called Picado in Spanish, or appoggiato in Italian. So you basically play, let's say that you play the E string, and the first thing you do is play the E string and hold your finger onto the next one. So I play the E string and I hold the finger on the B string. And that gives you a lot more volume compared to this technique where you have your thumb available. So because this technique felt easier, at the start. I started to play more with the scalar approach from the start. And then when it comes to chords, I was playing also with my thumb.
Yeah.
And then when arpeggiating, of course, I was using also my thumb as well. So there was kind of a mix of the two techniques, but mainly my lead soloing stuff were all done with this technique here. Now it's a little bit of both. Yeah. I always try to use my thumb a lot in the later years compared to when I was playing as a little kid. And that's because it lets you use 4 fingers instead of just 3, you know, and you can play a lot of lines for, let's say, 1 note per string kind of arpeggios. So this kind of stuff, it's way easier when you use your thumb, you know. So this technique here was the starting point, and then I also developed my thumb.
Yeah. How? But you said the difference. Can I hear the difference? And of course, this is the acoustic guitar, so it doesn't. It's not the same. But the difference between the attack, because now you can choose between using the flash.
This is called in Italian pizzicato, and it's not. So you have less volume compared to this technique. So if I want to do a tremolo, for example, I can do both ways. But this has a lot more volume. So when it comes to acoustic guitar, for example, I tend to use more my appoggiato technique. So for example, if I have to play so a little bit like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's fun. What are some things that, because this is what fascinates me the most, is that it seems to me at least that you are able to do stuff because of your technique that is very hard to do with the pick.
Yes.
Could you show some examples
I always say that
string skipping and stuff like
that? I always say that, let's say that the rule is that playing on the same string, it's easier with the pick, just because there are 2 movements. And playing on different strings is actually easier with fingers. So if you have like a major 7 arpeggio, let's say, a lot of pick users maybe use this shape, or they use like a different note distribution on the fretboard. I'm able to do like just the chord shape and using on my lead playing, because this is 1 note per string, and pick users try to avoid it because it's very hard to do. Of course, you can use sweep picking, but it's a little bit hard to control sweep picking, especially rhythmically speaking, unless you are Frank Gambale. But I mean, the thing is that in pick is always easier to use when you have like 3 note per string stuff or 2 note per string, like pentatonic stuff, like Eric Johnson. This is way easier to do with the pick rather than fingers. In fact, I did work really hard in order to play this stuff clean. But if I have to play this, it's really easy for me because I already have the fingers on the string. So I don't need to wait for the pick to arrive on the string. It's a different movement compared to sweep picking, of course. So, and the problem you have with sweep picking is that you cannot skip strings. I can do arpeggios.
Exactly, because that is what I've thought is like your genius, is that it seems to me that you are string skipping with such ease. And of course, it's because you practice a lot and you're super talented.
If you want to play some strange arpeggios, like playing this note here and immediately playing a note on the E string, you can play it with ease because it's almost immediate. So that's the main advantage you have with fingers. So my main point was to slowly building a vocabulary that was taking advantage of this aspect. That's why I'm trying to develop more my thumb skills compared to the other fingers.
So what do you work on now? Like, how do you feel that you still have a long way to go?
Of course, I have a really long way to go.
It's such a demotivating thing to hear.
Well,
for us,
yeah, but I mean, for me, it's always finding some new ways to play the same stuff. For example, I always like to experiment with the arpeggios. Talking about this technique here, because I was so used to just using this one that most of my muscular memory is with this technique here. And when I switch to this one, I don't have the same amount of vocabulary, let's say, compared to the other technique. So I'm slowly switching, like trying to study some new lines using also my thumb. Like this. And when I have to play scales, I switch to the other technique.
Because it's the most efficient for that.
It's easier to play scales with the other techniques. So that's why I'm still using both. There's not really a better technique.
But can you show me some specific, like right now, let's say this was not like interview night. What would you have, and if you had practice night, what are some things that you would have practiced on right now?
I always try to warm up a little bit first. So
okay. So this is like super unfair.
Like banal arpeggios, try to all this stuff. It's incredibly useful still now. I'm learning intervals. These are fourths intervals. Thirds.
And you still do this to keep.
And I try to came up with different patterns, like. And I always like to take my time to warm up, especially the left hand.
This was unfair of me asking you to go straight to the most difficult thing, just call. But I want to, like, it's also fun to hear, because you also play, like, these are like all these things you're doing now is very like virtuoso, it's classical, it's jazz, but you are also like a rock guitarist, which is like your versatility is fun to me. What were the first like rock riff, like you said AC/DC earlier?
I remember
the first like rock solos and stuff you did.
Riff I learned, maybe not really the first, but one of the first for sure, was If You Want Blood, You Got It. I mean, this is not the right guitar to do that, but it was the first riff I learned back when I was a little kid. I was really into AC/DC, and
AC/DC is great. But the first solo, though, like the first, did you ever do that? Like sure. Like trying to like replicate
I still remember.
A solo? Yeah, which one?
We all learned that Stairway to Heaven solo. We all learned like, and all of that.
Yeah, of course.
I passed through all the traditional 70s rock uh, repertoire, let's say. But it was fun. Of course, it was incredibly useful because I think as a guitar player, you need to know the history of the electric guitar, you know. And that was incredibly useful for sure. And that was especially thanks to my father, because I consider him most like a listening guide rather than just a pure teacher. And that was incredibly useful because I was really into rock, and still I was when I was like 15 or something. But then my father said, you need to go back in time and listen to the players that came before, so you have a clearer idea of how guitar developed through the years. And that's why, like, he introduced me to Django Reinhardt, for example. He introduced me to Wes Montgomery, introduced me to Barney Kessel, Joe Pass, a lot of jazz guys. And that was incredibly useful for my musical development.
That's cool. That's it's great, and it's so fun to hear you play. It is so intimate. Like I guess usually when you do stuff like this, you have like your rig, your amp and stuff. But I think this is the interesting stuff for people to hear, that you can just like. This is again demotivating, that you can just pick up, like you just before we went to this call, I asked if you had a guitar around. You're just like, maybe I have something, and you just pick up some random acoustic guitar and you can do this.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's super impressive, super inspiring. But if someone wants to, because I guess now because of you, there's a lot of young people out there who are, and this is strange to me because before when I was young, it was like playing with your fingers. It was kind of like classical guitar. It was uncool, quotation mark. Now, if you see on TikTok and Instagram, that it's cool. People want to play like Matteo Mancuso because that's how we do it now. Which again is like super. That is what I find the most fascinating with you. But if there's young people out there or old people out there who want to learn how to play like you, how do one start? Like, what's like the entry level? If you're going to show us something like something quite easy for us to practice.
If they want to play in fingerstyle, I always talk about the advantages and the disadvantages you have with fingerstyle, because as I said before, there's no right technique to play guitar. And if you want to play electric guitar with fingers, that's okay. Or acoustic guitar, that's for sure okay. But you need to know what are the advantages you have with the pick and what are the advantages you have with fingers. Because I always say that fingers and fingerstyle in general is a little bit more, let's say, I don't remember the word in English, but in other words, in other words, let's say,
maybe we can,
the fact that you need to take care of your nails, for some people, it's really a disadvantage, because there are some people that they have really not so strong nails, so they tear up immediately. Mm-hmm. So if you have this kind of condition, for example, I always suggest to use acrylic, for example, and like acrylic gel in order to strengthen the nails. And I use it actually. I use acrylic gel for these 3 fingers, because if you play electric guitar with the nails, they will tear up after like 1 hour of playing. If you use natural nails.
So you do use. What is this? Is it something that you paint on the nails, or is it kind of a plastic?
It's a gel that it's solid. It becomes solid with UV rays. So you have this kind of oven where you put your fingers. It's kind of the thing you see on the beauty salons, basically. And this is a product
this is behind the scenes.
That every you see it on every girl, basically. You know, it's kind of a fake gel. But the thing with the gel is that you can build, of course, a thicker nail layer onto your real nail. And that becomes a lot stronger, and you can play electric guitar easily with fingers. And not so many people know about this. And that's why they prefer to play electric guitar with the pick, because if the pick consumes, you just change it, you know, and that's the advantage you have with the pick. If I broke a nail, for example, I can do everything. I have like a good tone with this two, and if I broke this one, I have an awful tone with this one here. So that's why in order to keep your chops up, let's say with fingerstyle, you need to take care of your nails. And for some people,
has it ever happened though? Have you broken a nail? That would stop the tour.
On a gig, I think. But that was because I didn't really, took care of the gel stuff for a lot of time. So it was starting to, like the natural nail was without the gel, basically. So that's why it took off. Yeah. But if you take care of the nails and you always have a good layer of gel, that will not really happen a lot of times. In fact, it only happened once in a lot of concerts that I did. So luckily for me, it doesn't happen very often, but it depends on the nails you have, of course.
Yeah. And other than that, what are the negatives with
it depends also on the style you want to achieve. Like if you want to play like Yngwie Malmsteen, for example, then I should say, okay, then choose a pick, because this is the best way to sound like Yngwie, of course. But
you're able to sound kind of like Yngwie. A little bit. Like I've heard you do a lot of.
There was, I think, like this kind of stuff. Yeah, I studied a little bit of Yngwie. But of course, it depends on the thing you want to achieve. I kind of, in a way, because I started with fingers, I was forced to always figure out a different way to do some of these licks. So it kind of, it was I always say that it was a creativity boost, because I always needed to figure out a different fingering or a different way to play with my right hand. And that maybe with time developed my personal style.
So and the most difficult thing is to play fast on one string.
That is where like
the pick has its.
This kind of things, it's really hard to do with fingers, because as I said,
and quite easy
with the pick, and also to have the same tone with all the fingers, because you can have a really good nail on this one and a really like bad nail on the middle finger. And if you don't have an even sound with all the fingers, it will start to get a little bit difficult to be clean with your technique. Meanwhile, with the pick, if you have a nick on your pick, you just change it and you have a fresh pick, you know?
Yeah. But if you have some exercise, so let's say I'm down with fixing my nails. I just wanna try something new. I want to adapt my technique. I want to learn how to. I don't even know how to play bass. I play bass with the thumb.
I think the first thing will be to learn how to play the chromatic scale without repeating fingers. Like I always try to avoid playing two notes with the same finger. It's always alternating. Like, let's say. Like something like that. This can be the first exercise that I can suggest. And I always try to play with these three fingers, not so much with these two. Because I'm simply faster with three fingers compared with two.
So would you suggest for beginners to use three? Because using the ring finger,
I always suggest to always start with all the fingers, like three fingers, because the two fingers technique has some limitations, and especially because the hand is not really relaxed a lot of times. Like if you have to play fact, the line that I always play, it's always way more relaxed when you play with these 3 fingers.
Which makes sense. It's like economics.
Yeah,
it's more economical.
And one other thing I can suggest is try to implement your thumb for some of your lines. That can be, let's say, the next step for the right technique. So make sure you have this Picado thing going on, and then try to develop your thumb as well.
It's interesting because when I used to play, I don't play unfortunately that much guitar anymore, but I used to play in a blues band. We played quite a bit, and of course then it's not. I tried to play fast to some extent, but it was not like necessarily my thing wasn't to do that. But I used my fingers quite a bit. Like I used to hide my pick in my index finger, and I used my thumb and stuff. More like John Mayer typically when he uses fingers quite a bit, but of course in a completely different style than you. So I think, and I guess that's not like impressive to the same extent. But have you heard of? There's another guy, a rock guy who's only playing with fingers. Richie Cox.
I know.
Heard of him?
Yeah, and he uses. I saw some
you know
videos,
him actually,
but I'm not quite sure if he used exactly the same technique. But he can.
I don't think he uses the same technique as. To be honest, I'm not sure what technique he did, but he uses a lot of legato. And he has like a, I think he's like a legato player. So I think his way of, he's super fast, super talented, and he also has a completely unique style. But he will struggle to play Eruption by Van Halen. Like I don't think he will be able to do that.
It's not the same thing, because when you play electric fingers, you can work a lot more with your left hand, like doing a lot of legatos, for example.
Yes.
But you cannot do that with this one. Like you need to be able to play.
No chance. No chance.
And to call the notes with your right hand. And what I wanted to do, because I was really fascinated with a lot of fast pick players like Paul Gilbert, Yngwie Malmsteen, people like Aldi Meola, for example, they have an incredible, efficient right hand technique. And I wanted to have the same sound. That's why I learned this Picado technique, because I wanted to achieve that kind of language. And I wanted to achieve, of course, the legato thing too. Like people like Steve Vai or Van Allen too uses a lot of legato stuff. And that was, I think, after I developed this Picado thing going on. But in order to play efficiently with the acoustic guitar, you need to have volume too. So that's why I use mostly this Picado technique. But when I play electric guitar, I don't need that much volume, because you have distortion, you have the pickups. So I play mostly like that when I play with electric guitar.
I've heard that you use a lot of legato as well with electric guitar, but you also do a lot of alternate picking, or not alternate picking, obviously, but the finger technique that sounds like alternate picking.
I wanted to achieve that kind of sound, so I studied the stuff in order to get close to that, even if it's not the same thing, of course. But I wanted to, call the notes and without the legato, because for me, legato was cheating in a way back when I started playing. Then, of course, with maturing and discovering new techniques, it's just a different way to play the notes. There are no rules, of course. And plus the legato on the 100%. Guitar, especially the electric guitar, it's a different sound. So I don't like to separate those things. And if you can sneak some legato in it, sometimes it just sounds better. Sometimes it sounds more even.
Yep.
In fact, when I have to play like... If I have to play some of the jazz lines, for example, it's not like... Like if I call everything, it sounds too stiff in a way, And
100%.
If I have to get close to a saxophone sound, let's say, I sneak some legato, like... it's not really.
Now you yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
You lose some of the but I think you said it right. You said it well. You said it's different languages, and I think in order to be like a master, you need to know as many languages as possible, and then you can start to play with them. And most people don't get to that level where they can just like take some from here. Oh, I want to go here now, and I want to mix them, and I want to do stuff like that. And I think you of course you're at that level, and it's super interesting. And I know we're going to wrap up very soon, but I want to end this with a fun game. If I just throw out some names or some concepts or some bands, and I want you to just say the first thing that comes to mind when you hear them. Like it could be a feeling, it could be an emotion, it could be a word, a memory, like something. And I just want your instant reaction to it, if you will. Are you ready? Okay, let's start. Jimi Hendrix.
Innovation, for sure. That's the
Steve Vai. Oh, sorry.
Personality. Is one of the most personal player I can think of. Yeah.
Mateus Asato.
Oh, tasteful. Yeah.
Yes, he is. Oh, yes, he is. that was a good one. Yngwie Malmsteen.
Natural born talent. Even if I had 3 words, but
big personality. Yeah, you can use as many words you want. Cory Wong.
Cory Wong. I think it can be. He's an amazing musician all around, and by all around, it means that he takes care not only about the music, but he takes care of everything. From it looks like I don't know Cory personally, like we just met once, but it looks like the guy that takes care of everything, takes care of the mix, takes care of the band.
Yeah, and he takes care of everyone.
I think the first maybe good band leader can be the first thing that I attribute to Cory, because it looks like the kind of guy that have everything in place. Like I know that you need to sound like this, and he has like a lot of people in his band, so you need to take care of those people when you have this kind of project. So I think a good thing will be band leader. Yeah,
I think what's fascinating with Cory to me is that he doesn't like I think in order to become an amazing guitarist, like really virtuoso amazing guitarist, you need to have an ego. I think you have an ego, Matteo, to some extent. You want to be the best. You want to be better. You look at, like you just mentioned it when you were younger. It was, I think, the game of becoming better drives you. But I don't think when it comes to Cory, I don't think he looked at it as a competition. He just saw that, but if everybody wants to play lead, like do this, if I do this, I will have all of this space to myself, and I can be the guy who's like playing the funkiest effing riffs that the world has ever seen. And the competition is probably less because everybody else is competing about being the fastest or knowing the most scale, knowing the most languages, if you will. And I think that to me is fascinating. And I think the fact that type of musical personality and that type of musical guitarist can become world renowned as he is. It's an amazing thing to me. Tommy Emmanuel.
Tommy Emmanuel, insane groove. I never saw just one player creating such a strong groove with just one guitar, and it sounds like there are 10 guitars.
John Mayer, we mentioned him earlier.
John Mayer, it's kind of a mix of tasteful, like Mateus, an incredible songwriter as well. I really like how John writes his song. Yeah.
Do you think that he is a highly rated guitarist, but I have this feeling that we don't quite appreciate how good he is right now. I think he's one of the guys that, unfortunately, he has this rumor on him for being like a ladies' man and all this Hollywood stuff and all these things that he's spent time on. But I think that has kind of taken away some of the glory from his guitar playing. So I think that he will be after. I hope he live a long life, but after he passes, I think we'll be like, shit, he was like our times, Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, whatever you will.
Well, yeah, I think
maybe
you cannot underestimate John's skills. I mean, it was one of the most tasteful bendings I think he has. The way he just plays melodies is technical in his own way, because a lot of people associate technical things on guitar with fast stuff, but actually being able to do a bend in a proper way is also technical. You need to have the technique in order to do a melody in a good way and make the guitar sound the way it sounds. So if you look at that perspective, John is a very technical player, because I never saw him making a bad bending. I never saw him making like a bad melody or sounding bad, out of time. It's always like right in the groove.
100%.
It's always like tasteful, and the bending is always on point. That's also technical for me. You don't need to play fast to be technical.
100%. The bends is like the first thing I lost when I hadn't played guitar in a while, and I started to play, and I was like, what the fuck? Like my bends were all off. I sounded like, that's one of the things I think that you can immediately hear if it's a skilled guitar player or if it's like a kind of skilled guitar player. Yeah. You can hear it in the bends. And it doesn't matter if you have practiced one Matteo Mancuso lick that is quite fast and you are able to kind of play that smooth. You can immediately hear it. If you lose it you're trying to rest a bit on the bend and it's off, then it's like...
I mean, that's one thing that people forget sometimes. You need to practice both the fast things and the slow things. If you practice only the fast things, you will not be able to play the slow ones properly. And there are a lot of people that can shred like Yngwie, but when you ask them to play a melody, it sounds that it's not in place yet. Yeah. Maybe they do it and the notes are right, but it doesn't sound in place. So that's why a lot of people, you need to study. You need to study the slow stuff. You need to study the melodies. You need to study the chords, and because it is slowly, it can make you a way better guitar player, and you will play better even the fast things if you concentrate also on that stuff. Yeah.
Although I have to say, the most fucking annoying thing are the ones who are playing slow and sloppy and saying like, "Oh, I don't want to." The shred it's not musical to me. I just want to play. Like nothing is more annoying to me.
Yeah, I guess for me, I don't want to have limitations, so that's why I always.
Of course study. You don't. Of course you don't.
If you have limitation, then
but who the fuck will want?
It's something. Everybody, has his own way of making music, of course. And if you don't need incredible fast scales to make your music, that's right. At the end of the day, we are all making music. But to me, as a guitar player, I don't want to have limitations with this instrument. I want to be able to think something and be able to play it. And in order to do it, you just need to study.
Yeah, and you don't go to the gym and be like, "Oh, I actually want weak muscles. I'm just here for a show." But I don't. Oh, I look at you are very strong, but I don't want that. I want to just lift these easy weights because it makes no sense. It makes no sense. Okay, this has been an honor. It's been a treat. Thank you so much for your time, Matteo. You are going out on tour. Your first solo North America tour, and people should go out of their effing way to get tickets. Where can people find more info about you and
well, you can. Tour? I think you can find all the tickets on my website. I think that most of the gigs are already there. There are some gigs that they didn't upload yet, but you can find most of the tickets there. Yeah.
You're going all over. I see. Like you're going all over the U.S. and in Canada as well. So I think if you're interested in music and you want a really cool experience, go check out Matteo Mancuso. And if you want to warm up, go on YouTube or go to Instagram or go to TikTok and watch this guy, because it's it's very inspiring and also a bit demotivating for me as a guitar player myself. But it's really fun. So Matteo, thank you so much for your time. Let me know when you come to Norway, and then I'll
I will.
I'll come by.
Thank you so much. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.